Good afternoon. President Chris, I want to join with you and the Chamber in welcoming Her Excellency, our new governor, to this very first legislative luncheon. I will always have a special place in my heart for Governor Helen because she arrived on my birthday and happened to be the only gift I got. I had to leave the next morning for Gibraltar, Jersey, London, and I was gone a week. And so we didn't have any time the Friday was a bit of a blur, the 6th. And so with the governor's arrival and swearing in and reception. So when I got back on the following Saturday, I expected, to have the royal treatment from my wife and my 2 sons. And my eldest son said, gift, you don't need any gift. There aren't too many people that can boast on having gotten a governor for their birthday. We've gotten off to a really good start, the governor, myself, and the cabinet. And there are always issues with any government settling in. We have a young government. We have a significant number of members who have never been elected before. And they're always settling in pains. I won't say growing pains, settling in pains. But I think the government is coming together very well. And although it is the greatest challenge I've ever had, managing such a bunch of very bright and experienced and business-like people, it is a challenge that I welcome warmly. And I really do believe that the way things are going bodes well for the future of Cayman. Your Excellency, I want to say to you that the wonderful hospitality that we have received and are receiving today should not be misconstrued by any of us as an excuse, merely an excuse for an afternoon off from the office. These occasions provide valuable interaction between the government and the business community, as well as an opportunity for chamber members and their invited guests themselves to discuss the state of play in their respective industries and to examine the ways in which they can continue to contribute to the development of these islands. Bearing this in mind, I am therefore especially pleased to endorse the Chamber's Future of Cayman Economic Development Initiative, of which the President spoke so passionately just now. Like President Duggan, I'm convinced that in today's economic landscape, national development goals will only be reached if there is a genuine partnership between government and private enterprise. And I do not speak here only in narrow terms of funding for public-private sector projects. For while this is an important driver of economic regeneration, the opportunity also exists to develop a new model for small, open economies such as ours, whose only real resource is our people. A new type of partnership is required if government and private enterprise are both to achieve their respective goals. There is already a lot of common ground between the Chamber's 5-point plan and our vision for growth and development of Cayman. I therefore look forward to continuing to receive the Chamber's views on how best we can achieve these goals, working together, and on hearing more about the role and the contribution the Chamber will make. Before I give you some of the highlights of the government's role, or what we view as the government's role in this new partnership, let me, President Chris and CEO Will and all the rest of the Chamber Council, thank you for the invitation here this afternoon. The last 4 months have been a whirlwind for those of us in government. And so in spite of my earlier entreaty not to view this afternoon as an occasion simply to get out of the office, I have to confess to you that I welcome the escape, temporary though it is. After weeks of battling with budget issues and grappling with the proposed amendments to the immigration law, I'm enjoying the opportunity to spend some time among familiar faces, to break bread with you, and to have the opportunity to update you on the progress of the government since we took office in May. I believe you will recall that a recurring theme during the election campaign was confidence. Confidence that a new government would put country before party. Confidence that a new government would adhere to the best principles of fiscal responsibility. confidence that the abuse of state resources would stop, confidence that transparency and good governance would return to the management of our affairs, and confidence that you could depend on the government to keep its word. I think we can say that we have met most of those expectations so far, although we are keenly conscious that there is no room for complacency, as inspiring confidence is an ongoing endeavor. Confidence is the currency that will turn our economy around, and it therefore should not have come as a surprise to anyone who is following developments in Cayman over the 8 to 12 months preceding the general elections, that one of our very first acts on assuming office was to seek to regain the trust and confidence of the Foreign Commonwealth Office, that we could get this country back on track. Our ability to produce a 4-year fiscal plan, which received the approval of the UK on first submission, has gone a long way to returning confidence in Cayman, as it has provided the certainty that investors require and returned stability to the management of our economic affairs. We are fully cognizant of the importance of this stability, both to you, the members of the Chamber, and to external investors. Having invited you to partner with us to restore growth to the economy and ultimately to improve the quality of life of our people, let me assure you that we shall endeavor to provide the enabling environment to make this a reality in as short a time as possible. The next 12 months will be especially critical. We do not have a lot of fiscal space in which to operate, and it will be a test of fiscal discipline characterized by new levels of efficiency and imaginative solutions to achieve our budget goals. The civil service has already been briefed on this new dispensation, and to the credit of the fine men and women who we entrust to implement the policies of government, they have signed on and are fully involved in meeting the goals of the government and of the Ministry of Finance in particular. We have a particularly hard task master in the person of Minister Archer, as anyone who is working within the public service will tell you. But we want him to be that way, difficult though life becomes, because it is only with instilling that level of fiscal discipline that we will get the affairs of government really and truly back on track. We are in the final stage of preparation of the budget, and the FCO's economic advisor, Mr. Richard Homewood, is presently here assisting with the completion of that exercise. I'm delighted that he has been able to join us at this luncheon. We plan to present the budget to the Legislative Assembly next week, Friday. This year's budget will see further significant reduction in government expenditure, and in particular in personnel costs. There is but one new revenue measure, the introduction of directors' fees. We will not take on any new debt and will continue to pay down existing debt, as well as make a substantial contribution to government's past service pension liability. Investments in capital projects will be responsible, and we believe the one revenue measure that we are introducing will be zero inflationary. We are projecting a substantial surplus at year end. Having been told all that, you will no doubt be asking the next logical question: how do you intend to drive growth in the economy? As most of you will be aware, there are two key national projects, the cruise ship berthing and the airport expansion, on which we are depending for both short-term and long-term growth. The process being undertaken for these national projects is first to develop policy guidance for each project, and from that policy guidance, a strategic outline case is developed, which is then followed by an outline business case. As has been previously announced, the government has retained PricewaterhouseCoopers to prepare an outline business case, and the cruise berthing facility will proceed on the basis of a public-private sector partnership. Funding for the airport expansion is already in an escrow account. The outline business case for cruise berthing and the strategic outline case for the airport projects are due to be presented to Cabinet in mid-October. The Deputy Premier is working diligently to get these two projects up and running. From the private sector standpoint, you would have heard only yesterday that the first phase of Dr. Shetty's Health City is on schedule to open next February. Earlier this week came the announcement that DART's Kimpton-branded $200 million hotel and condominium project on Sept Mile Beach has obtained planning approval. Also in the news this week was the encouraging announcement that Cayman's Special Economic Zone, Cayman Enterprise City, is beginning to live up to its potential, with some 85 companies signed up to enter the zone, up from 29 at the beginning of this year. Talks are also underway with developers for the construction of a 5-star Conrad Hilton hotel in Beach Bay, as well as a hotel at the Health City site in East End. Government is also in discussions with developers in relation to a proposed $360 million golfing community, which will include a residential area off Frank Sound Road in North Side. This project would also involve the extension of the east-west arterial for another 10 miles from its terminus at Newlands to Frank Sound. Meanwhile, the extension to the Esther Tibbetts Highway has been completed and opened, and the Minister of Infrastructure is continuing negotiations with DART to rebalance some aspects of the For Cayman Investment Alliance agreement it had reached with the previous administration. Growth will therefore be mostly private sector led, with government playing the role of facilitator. In this, I am reminded of the view of Winston Churchill, which is as relevant today as it was when he uttered these words in 1959. Some people regard private enterprise as a predatory tiger to be shot. Others look at it as a cow that can give milk. Not enough people see it as a healthy horse pulling a sturdy wagon. This government will do all in its power to ensure that the wagon is sturdy and that you have the means with which to pull it. What we do not want for Cayman is the specter of jobless growth that continues to haunt recovery in Europe and elsewhere. We are committed to addressing the problem of the cost of doing business in Cayman, and we are depending on business to do its part to invest the cost savings into expansion that will include increased employment. You do not need me to tell you that an employed population fuels increased business activity. We have instituted a policy that guides concessions in the areas of import duty, stamp duty, and landholding companies' share transfer tax. The policy will provide greater certainty as to how such requests will be treated, and it streamlines the process of considering requests. We are also working to trim electricity costs by a reduction in the duty paid for diesel that produces electricity sold to Caribbean utilities companies' customers. Our challenge, and I will be frank, in this regard is balancing the revenue loss against increased economic activity so that the country as well as consumers enjoys a net benefit. With regard to employment, we are adopting a two-pronged approach. The first is a proactive approach to placing Caymanians in available jobs through a reinvigorated National Workforce Development Agency. The agency has a diverse, multidimensional series of placement and training programs, some in partnership with private enterprise, that covers the needs of a wide range of clients who register with them. I therefore urge you as employers to participate in these programs and use the services that the NWDA provides to find Caymanians to fill the vacancies you may have in your businesses. Now, of course, if you can give the government the commitment to each employ at least one new Caymanian over the next 6 to 9 months, this will go a long way to reducing unemployment. The second strategy is the reform of immigration policy to make it more responsive to the employment needs of Caymanians, while at the same time ensuring that the labor needs of the market are adequate to service the areas where Caymanians are either not qualified or not available for whatever reason. I think I should point out here that while immigration legislation is, among other things, used to protect the jobs of the local population, it is not in itself employment legislation. It has not escaped my attention that either through ignorance or mischief, There are people who have been playing on the emotions of Caymanians to try to convince them that their interests are not being protected by the proposed amendments to the immigration bill, which was tabled and published in the Legislative Assembly last Friday. I therefore wish to spend a little time in addressing some of the fears and concerns that Caymanians have asked me and other members of the government about, and to seek to dispel some of the falsehoods being spread by people who, quite frankly, ought to know better. The first misconception is that the rollover policy has been abolished. This is patently untrue. The rollover policy will remain, but the term limit will be extended from 7 years to 9 years for all work permit holders. Previously, only key employees were able to remain here for 9 years. Essentially, the change means that all work permit holders will be treated in the same way that key employees currently are under the present rules, and the key employee provision will be repealed. Under the current system, it is the employer who makes the determination as to who is a key employee and who can stay beyond the 7 years to eventually qualify in terms of time spent on the island to apply for a permanent residence. By extending the length of time a work permit holder can remain to 9 years and allowing all work permit holders who reach 8 years to apply for permanent residence, this means that the government can now decide through an open and transparent point system who will be granted permanent residence rather than having this essentially determined by employers. I should add here that the criteria for earning points and the number of points required to qualify for permanent residence will be fairer and more objective, but also more demanding than previously. So as a country, we will be better able to determine the type of person that becomes a part of our permanent population in terms of skills, country of origin, age, etc. The other major piece of propaganda that I wish to deal with relates to the term limit extension permit holders, or TLEPs. The previous government legislated this category of work permit holders into law and ought to have acted on the report it commissioned to regularize the status of this group. On coming to office, we quickly realized that the term limit for the TLEPs would expire on the 28th of October, next month. And thus, we had to resolve this issue. There are just over 1,500 people who fall into this category, all of whom, by October 28th, will have been living here for more than 7 years. In the interest of fairness, the committee who reported to Cabinet on the TLEPs found that it would be discriminatory to treat this category of work permit holder any different than the other work permit holders, and the time spent here should count towards the 8-year requirement that already exists in the law as the point at which an application for permanent residence can be made. There was another concern which we haven't made much of until now, publicly that is. But in addition, there is the real possibility that government could become subject to legal action on human rights grounds if we allow a system to prevail that admits of discrimination. It was therefore thought advisable to let the new system that is being proposed work to determine whether the TLEPs would be eligible for permanent resident status rather than to expel more than 1,500 people all at once at the end of next month. The last thing the country can afford at this time is a rush of lawsuits claiming human rights abuses. Our reputation in the international community is still too fragile. The view has also been put abroad that if these 1,500 TLEP holders were sent home, automatically 1,500 Caymanians would find jobs. The truth is that of this number, over 900 are for jobs as domestics, gardeners, caregivers, and other jobs of that nature which Caymanians have generally demonstrated little interest in filling. It is also worthy of note, but generally ignored in the discussion, particularly the one on the radio. It is also worthy of note that in effect the TLEPs are only being extended for 45 days. That is until the 9th of December. During this period, the jobs will have to be advertised in the usual way, and Caymanians will have ample opportunity to apply for these jobs. If a Caymanian is willing and able to do the job, a new work permit should not be granted to that former TLEP holder. The entire immigration and work permit application process is being strengthened and protections built in to protect the integrity of the system. Phase 2 of the immigration reform is underway, and we expect to receive that report early in the new year. The second phase of the immigration reform will focus on the whole work permit application process, seeking ways of improving its efficiency and moving increasingly to an administrative system of approvals for work permits and permanent residence. I will not go into all of the details now, but I felt I should take the opportunity to dispel some of the rumors and misconceptions about what the amending bill will do. I will be speaking to the nation about the specific provisions of the bill over the course of the next few days, and so I ask those of you with an interest in these matters to stay tuned. And of course, if there are any specific concerns you have, I will seek to address them during the question period following my address. There is one other very important area that is of major concern to the government and every law-abiding citizen in Cayman, and that is the rise in crime over the last 2 years, in violent crime over the last 2 years or so. The recent spate of armed robberies is a matter of gravest concern to the government and to me personally. Although the use of guns to commit crimes is becoming far too common, I've told my friend, the Commissioner of Police, who's here with us, that we cannot and must not concede that this is an inevitable byproduct of progress in a growing nation. We must aim to stamp it out, do more to stem the inflow of unlicensed firearms to Cayman, and create an environment in which all criminals believe that they will be caught if they commit offenses and that they will be put away for a long time. I'm happy to say the Commissioner agrees with me. The truth is that the criminal element continues to change its modus operandi in ways that reap rewards. So that when there is a concerted effort to increase surveillance as a deterrent to robberies, for instance, the criminals shift their focus away from businesses that can afford the surveillance equipment to smaller operators who either cannot afford the camera systems or who they believe will travel home with the day's takings and are therefore vulnerable to attack on leaving their businesses or entering their homes. We must therefore be cognizant of the latest behavior among criminals and take countermeasures to thwart their success. You may have noticed over the past few weeks that our law enforcement agencies, through the use of the police helicopter, the national CCTV system, and a coordinated response, captured 4 persons who had just robbed a grocery store in Northside. In addition to this, by use of the same equipment and responses, our brave men and women in uniform quickly captured a man who carjacked a woman at gunpoint after a high-speed chase. Because we have a professionally run air operations unit that was able to respond so quickly, officers pursuing the car were able to back off the chase and hand over the pursuit to the helicopter, thus reducing the risk to our community whilst capturing the suspect. The Royal Cayman Islands Police Service has truly stepped up its game to ensure that technology and specialized equipment fill the evidence gap, which so often exists when we try to detect and prosecute serious crimes, especially gun-related crimes. The police have spent significant resources on training to improve the skill sets of officers in key areas such as report writing and evidence gathering, so that once we catch them and we get them to court, we can actually get a conviction. One of the great challenges that Cayman has faced and the force has faced in a small community like this is the unwillingness of people to bear witness against someone that they have seen or know to have committed a crime. The increased use of CCTV, and in particular the camera on the helicopter, is making it easier to fill this evidence gap without having to rely on live witnesses. And just this morning, we broke ground on a new set of custody suites located at Fairbanks, which will replace our old police lockup. Not only will this assist with us complying with the provisions of our Bill of Rights about treating prisoners humanely, but the segregated cells in the new custody suites will allow us to keep suspects separate, so much of which is not possible now in the lockup at the Georgetown Police Station, or indeed at the one in West Bay. And so we will be able to keep them separate and prevent their usual collaboration to position their stories or to coordinate their stories, and thus should improve our chances of cracking many of these serious cases. In closing, Mr. President, I think we are moving in the right direction on the same road. I look forward, on behalf of the government and my colleagues, many of whom are here this afternoon, to continue dialogue with you and your membership on ways that the work of the government and the work of the Chamber and its members can complement each other for the common good and for the benefit of these beloved islands. I thank you for your attention.